Welcome back, thanks for tuning to our Reddit stories today. Where are you watching from? Drop in a comment and let's dive in. The glass was cold against my palm, condensation beating and tracing icy rivulets down my skin. I looked at the water, then at my son, Daniel, his face etched with a concern that seemed almost practiced. "Thanks, Danny," I managed, my voice a little rougher than usual. He smiled, a flash of the boy I remembered, the one who used to trail after me in the garden, asking endless questions about the worms and the roses. "You looked a little flushed, Dad. Long day." "Yeah," I said, taking a hesitant sip. The water was cool and refreshing, but it did little to quench the unease that had been simmering inside me for the past 24 hours. A day that had irrevocably altered the landscape of my perception, turning the familiar into something strange and unsettling. Yesterday, I'd received a call from Mrs. Henderson at Franklin and Fidelity Insurance. A routine check, she'd said, just confirming some information. But the information she was confirming had left me reeling, a sizable life insurance policy, taken out on me, with Daniel as the sole beneficiary. My Daniel. My only son. I'd stammered through the call, feigning ignorance, telling Mrs. Henderson I'd look into it and call her back. Then, I'd slammed the phone down and stared at it, willing it to ring and tell me it had all been a mistake. It didn't. Now, here he was, offering me water with that same concerned smile, and I was paralyzed by a conflict of emotions, love, suspicion, fear, and a deep, aching sadness. "Long day," I repeated, setting the glass down on the worn oak coffee table. "Just paperwork, you know." Daniel chuckled. Paperwork. The bane of every self-respecting small business owner. He was referring to my antique restoration shop, Old Timers, a place I'd poured my heart and soul into for the past 30 years. It was more than a business, it was a sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the beauty and craftsmanship of the past. "Speaking of which," Daniel continued, leaning forward, "I was thinking about that shipment of Victorian furniture coming in next week. Have you checked the manifest?" He was so normal. "So, Daniel." It was almost impossible to reconcile the image of the caring son in front of me with the chilling implications of the life insurance policy. "Not yet," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "I'll get to it tomorrow." "Okay. Maybe I can give you a hand. I have some free time." "That'd be great, Danny." "Thanks." He stayed for another hour, chatting about his work as a software developer, his upcoming trip to see his girlfriend, Emily, in Chicago, and the local baseball team's abysmal performance. He was engaging, funny, and genuinely seemed interested in my well-being. With every word, every gesture, the knot in my stomach tightened. After he left, I walked to the window and watched his car disappear down the street. The early evening sky was a bruised purple, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle from the overgrown vines that climbed the side of the house. This house. The house I'd built with my own two hands, the house where I'd raised Daniel after his mother, Sarah, had passed away. Sarah. Her memory was a constant presence in this house, a gentle warmth that had always shielded us from the cold edges of grief. Would she have seen this coming? Would she have known that the boy we loved so dearly would one day, what? Want me dead? The thought was too horrifying to fully embrace. I spent the next few hours pacing the floor, replaying the conversation with Mrs. Henderson, Daniel's visit, and countless memories of my son. I tried to find a logical explanation, a plausible scenario that would absolve him of any wrongdoing. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was losing my mind. Sleep offered no respite. I tossed and turned, haunted by fragmented images, Daniel as a child, his face beaming as he presented me with a crudely drawn Father's Day card, Daniel as a teenager, sullen and withdrawn, struggling with the loss of his mother, Daniel as a young man, graduating from college, full of promise and ambition. And then, the image of Mrs. Henderson's face, her voice echoing in my ears, a life insurance policy. Mr. Daniel Miller, beneficiary. Finally, as the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I made a decision. I couldn't confront Daniel directly. Not yet. I needed to know the truth, and I needed to find it on my own. The next morning, I drove to Franklin and Fidelity Insurance. Mrs. Henderson greeted me with a polite, professional smile. "Mr. Miller," she said, ushering me into her office. "Thank you for coming in." I need to see the policy, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. Mrs. Henderson hesitated. I'm not sure I'm authorized to. Authorize it, I interrupted, my voice rising. I'm the subject of the policy. I have a right to know. She sighed, her smile fading. Very well. But I must advise you that this is highly unusual. She retrieved the file and placed it on her desk. It was thicker than I expected, filled with forms and documents. My eyes scanned the pages, searching for answers. There was Daniel's signature, clear and unmistakable, on the application. There was my signature, or rather, a forgery of it, on the consent form. The amount of the policy was staggering, enough to set Daniel up for life. Who paid the premiums? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Miller did, Mrs. Henderson replied. With what money? I demanded. Daniel's salary was decent, but not enough to cover the premiums on a policy of this magnitude. Mrs. Henderson shrugged. I'm afraid I don't have access to that information. I spent the next hour poring over the documents, searching for any clue, any detail that could shed light on Daniel's motives. I found nothing. The policy was airtight, the paperwork meticulously completed. Except for the forged signature, it was a perfectly executed plan. As I left the insurance office, the weight of the truth settled upon me like a shroud. Daniel had taken out a life insurance policy on me. He had forged my signature. He had paid the premiums. And he stood to gain a fortune upon my death. But why? What could possibly drive my son to do such a thing? Driven by a desperate need to understand, I decided to delve into Daniel's life, to uncover the secrets he had been keeping from me. I started with his finances. I knew he had a good job, but I also knew he wasn't particularly frugal. He liked nice things, a new car, expensive clothes, frequent trips. Could he be in debt? Was he struggling financially? I discreetly contacted a friend who worked at a bank and asked him to run a credit check on Daniel. The results confirmed my suspicions. Daniel was deeply in debt, owing tens of thousands of dollars to credit card companies and loan sharks. He was also heavily involved in online gambling, losing significant amounts of money on a regular basis. The picture was becoming clearer, but it was no less disturbing. Daniel wasn't just a son who had made a bad decision, he was a man desperate for money, a man willing to do anything to escape his financial woes. Next, I decided to investigate Daniel's relationship with Emily, his girlfriend in Chicago. He had always spoken highly of her, describing her as intelligent, kind, and supportive. But something about their relationship had always felt distant. They rarely saw each other, and their conversations seemed stilted and superficial. Using my admittedly limited computer skills, I managed to find Emily on social media. Her profile was filled with pictures of her with other men, pictures that painted a very different picture of her relationship with Daniel. It became clear that Emily was not who Daniel had portrayed her to be. She was using him, taking his money, and leading him on with no intention of ever committing to him. Daniel was being bled dry, emotionally and financially. He was desperate, vulnerable, and clearly not thinking straight. But did that excuse his actions? Could I forgive him for what he had done? I spent the next few days in a state of turmoil, grappling with these questions. I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with Daniel, searching for clues, for signs that I had missed. Had I been too preoccupied with my own life to notice his struggles? Had I failed him as a father? The weight of guilt was almost unbearable. I had always tried to be a good father, to provide for Daniel, to support him in his dreams. But after Sarah died, I had become withdrawn, lost in my own grief. Had I inadvertently pushed him away, leaving him vulnerable to the darkness that had consumed him? Finally, I knew I couldn't avoid confronting Daniel any longer. I called him and asked him to come over for dinner. He seemed surprised, but agreed without hesitation. As I waited for him to arrive, I prepared a simple meal, Sarah's famous spaghetti and meatballs, his favorite. I set the table with her best china, the one we only used for special occasions. I wanted to create an atmosphere of warmth and normalcy, a space where we could talk openly and honestly. When Daniel arrived, he seemed genuinely happy to see me. He hugged me tightly, his eyes filled with affection. For a moment, I almost believed that everything was a misunderstanding, that I had somehow gotten it all wrong. But then I looked into his eyes, and I saw the truth. I saw the guilt, the fear, the desperation that was consuming him. We sat down to eat, and for a few minutes, we talked about trivial things, the weather, the traffic, the latest news. But the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel Daniel's anxiety building with each passing moment. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I put down my fork and looked him straight in the eye. "Daniel," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I know about the life insurance policy." His face paled, and he dropped his fork with a clatter. He stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "Dad," he stammered, I can explain." "Explain what, Daniel?" I asked, my voice rising. "Explain why you took out a life insurance policy on me. Explain why you forged my signature. Explain why you stand to gain a fortune upon my death." He hung his head, unable to meet my gaze. I was desperate, Dad," he whispered. I didn't know what else to do. "Desperate?" I scoffed. "Desperate enough to wish me dead?" "No, Dad," he cried, his voice breaking. "I would never want to hurt you. I needed the money. I was in so much debt. I was losing everything." He proceeded to tell me everything, the gambling addiction, the mounting debts, the manipulative girlfriend. He confessed to forging my signature, to paying the premiums with money he had borrowed from loan sharks. He pleaded for my forgiveness, promising to make amends, to turn his life around. As he spoke, I listened, my heart breaking with each word. I saw the pain and desperation in his eyes, and I realized that he wasn't the cold-blooded monster I had imagined. He was a flawed, vulnerable human being who had made a terrible mistake. But could I forgive him? Could I forget what he had done? I didn't know. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. I stood up from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness. The honeysuckle vines swayed gently in the breeze, their fragrance filling the air. I thought of Sarah, of the love and joy we had shared in this house. I thought of Daniel, the little boy who had once filled our lives with laughter and wonder. And then, I made a decision. I couldn't condone what he had done, but I couldn't abandon him either. He was my son, and I loved him, despite everything. I turned back to him, my eyes filled with tears. "Daniel," I said, my voice trembling, "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to help you get your life back on track." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with hope. "You mean it, Dad?" "I mean it," I said, nodding. "But you have to be willing to help yourself. You have to get help for your gambling addiction. You have to cut ties with Emily. And you have to be honest with me, no matter how difficult it may be." He nodded, his face streaked with tears. "I will, Dad," he promised. "I swear I will." And so, we began the long and arduous process of rebuilding our relationship. I helped Daniel find a therapist, and he started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He broke up with Emily, despite her protests and threats. And he started working with me at the antique shop, learning the trade and rediscovering his passion for craftsmanship. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, relapses, and moments of doubt. But we persevered, driven by a shared desire to heal and to move forward. Slowly but surely, Daniel began to change. He became more responsible, more compassionate, and more honest. He started paying off his debts, one small payment at a time. He started building a new life for himself, a life based on integrity and authenticity. And as he changed, so did I. I learned to let go of my anger and resentment, to focus on the present and the future. I learned to forgive, not just Daniel, but myself as well. 1 year later, Daniel came to me with a request. He wanted to take out a life insurance policy on himself, with me as the beneficiary. I hesitated, my old fears resurfacing. But then I looked into his eyes, and I saw the genuine love and respect that was there. "Okay, Daniel," I said, smiling. "But this time, let's do it the right way." And so, we did. We went to the insurance office together, filled out the paperwork honestly and transparently, and signed the documents in each other's presence. As we walked out of the office, hand in hand, I knew that we had finally put the past behind us. We had faced the darkness, and we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. The water Daniel had handed me that day, the day I found out about the policy, still held a strange significance. It was a reminder of the fear and uncertainty that had consumed me. But now, it was also a symbol of hope and redemption, a testament to the power of love and forgiveness. We had weathered the storm, and we had emerged, battered but not broken, into the sunlight. Our relationship might always bear the scars of that betrayal, but those scars were also proof of our resilience, our ability to heal, and our unwavering commitment to each other. That's it for today's story. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.